Hola, ¿qué tal? Gracias por acompañarnos nuevamente. Y el día de hoy tengo el honor de tener aquí en Meet the Teachers al maestro Edward.Clark, creador de Tripsichore. Welcome, Edward. Thank you for accepting this invitation for the interview.
It's the biggest day of my life. I'm so excited.
I know. Of course.
Thanks for having me here into the swell yoga pad.
Thank you. Thank you. So, why do you want to share with us about how you started yoga?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've thought a lot about whether one should tell the truth in these sorts of things, or whether one should make up a good story that makes it sound much more resonant with the kind of yoga mind that exists today. So I could tell one of two stories, and I like the one where I was wandering through the desert near Rishikesh, when I came upon a rubbish heap, and there in the trash I happened to find some small pieces of coconut on which were inscribed small figures doing what appeared to be yoga postures. And from these little fragments of coconut, I began my studies in yoga.
Amazing.
Incredible. 800-year-old fragments of coconut, yes. But, however, the truth is, now the made-up story is really much more interesting. Yeah, I was studying dance the woman I was studying dance with happened to take a liking to this boy in the class who he taught something. It was called Iyengar yoga or something like this. And suddenly we were being forced to study with this boy that she fancied. And anyway, I thought, oh, this is the worst thing. This is what hippies do. Late 70s, so just slightly maybe post-punk. And anyway, the worst thing in the world was hippies. That was like, oh, good heavens. They believed in peace and love and joy, those sort of things. Anyway, though it was all purely on a physical level, I managed to take enough away from it that was of interest and began to, with my girlfriend at the time, evolve a yoga practice of some kind that quite augmented what I was looking for, theatrically speaking, in the dance that I was doing. Mm-hmm. That was the beginning. That's the made-up story. But let's go back to the coconut pieces. Sacred postures inscribed on coconut shells, postures that had not been performed for 800 years. And I learned these in secret for 7 years, alone in a cave.
Lovely story.
Yes, and it's true.
Yeah. And for you, what is yoga?
It's always the question. Every interviewer comes at you with that one. It's a canon of techniques, as I see it, which can be applied to so many things. And indeed, over its very lengthy history, somewhat shady history, it has been applied to many things, many of which are contradictory. So they are about developing, I think, physical skill, but more importantly, the mental skills that involve coordinating the whole of one's being, one's intellect and one's imagination and one's emotions and one's breath and the whole body, endeavoring to skillfully make them do one thing, to be able to dedicate the entirety of your being to one thing. What that one thing might be, I think, is very much, to use yoga speak, dependent upon what one's dharma is, what is appropriate to an individual to do. And yoga is these skills by which you hone your ability to dedicate the entirety of your being to that which seems most appropriate to you. That's almost a soundbite, really. I think people will be wanting to write that one down, people viewing this at home.
No, yes, and so why do you teach yoga?
I do it to make money.
Seriously?
Dharmically speaking, I'm an artist, and I create theatrical works which happen to use what people assume to be yoga as the choreographic or theatrical vocabulary. And it so happens that, in a very real sense, the postures that we associate with yoga and the process of turning postures into vinyasa sequences inherently has in it the themes of balance and harmony and mysticism and ecstasy, and they're there in the postures. And these are theatrically potent, and oddly enough have hardly been used really as theatrical vocabulary. So it's given me an opportunity to speak or choreograph in a way that has allowed for the expression of things that it's hard to put across, and here I'm struggling to put it into words because it is actually better expressed by physical means. It's one cavalierly says mysticism and ecstasy and joy and balance, harmony, liberation, freedom, and that they're evocative words, but their actual meaning in the course of putting it into theatrical means or expression is they're limited, whereas what the body says, there are exquisite shades of meaning that people can interpret as freedom and balance and mysticism that you can't, the word itself doesn't say it nearly as well as the movement does.
It's like another kind of expression.
So anyway, as it happens, unfortunately, mysticism, freedom, ecstasy, balance, and harmony have not proved to be quite the big hit that they might have been, and I'm not raking in the millions by choreographing theatrical works that work like that. So most places, what I do, I like to do the shows that I'm doing. At this point, I'm just doing a one-person show, but in the past, the company has had as many as 8 people in it. Well, actually, once we did a show with 22 people in it.
Wow, that's amazing.
That was insane. The once taught
coordinate lots of people. Wow.
Yeah, well, the more bodies you have doing this, the better it seems to be. Anyway, I'm doing a one-person show at the moment, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I'm doing a one-person show, but it's, I do it where I go, and at the same time, one does teaching because, the people who are likely to want to come to the show are also likely to be interested in yoga. And, certainly for the last 25 to 30 years, when Tripsichore began overtly going, we're doing yoga theater. It started at a time when people who were interested in yoga were interested in anything that was yoga, because it was still quite new then. And the fact that there was a yoga theater troupe, well, I want to go see that because I'm into yoga, man. I want to go see. It was different than trying to attract a dance audience where that audience could come from many walks in life, and you would have to advertise in many places to get even a small audience. And likewise for theater, although, theater has tended to be a little more popular than dance. But we knew where our audience was going to be, that we go to every yoga studio in town, we ask them to help sponsor us, we give some free tickets to the owners, say, please tell your classes that this is happening. And, at that point, the yoga community was maybe a little less cutthroat than it is now. And, people would go, oh yeah, hey man, sure. And so, and then, we'll go and teach at your studio too, because that'll get some more students, and, we'll put on some workshops here. And ultimately, though, it's turned out at this point in time, and it may change again, the one makes more money doing the workshops and the teaching, and that has led to greater freedom artistically, because we're not tied to box office. At the same time, it's meant that we've had to approach the yoga in a way that people, I don't think, have necessarily reckoned on as being conventional. For me, I think personally what we do in yoga, in our training, and what we do on stage is highly orthodox, that we are like so pure in our adherence to how we understand yoga and what the principles informing asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, which I think are very much core to the technique that we do. I think we're like straight ahead, so square yogis. But oddly enough, partly I suppose because we do use it then as theatrical vocabulary, people see it as being highly innovative in some respects. And,
of course.
So we've become known for making very difficult sequences up and hard. It's going to be hard. That's not good. It's not good for business. It's going to be hard. A lot of places these days turns people off. And oddly enough, I don't really find it that. I mean, I think it's difficult. I think it's challenging.
Yes, it is.
But the idea behind it, of course, is to achieve a skill level that it seems to be doing like you're hardly trying. It just looks normal. Which is what makes it theatrically appealing. In circus or acrobatics, you have to try really hard to impress people. People should look at circus and go, oh my God, I could never do that. That's so, my mind has been blown looking at that. Whereas I think what we're trying to do in the choreography, and hence what we do in class, is make people identify with it, to empathize strongly with what's going on, to a degree that they feel they are deeply involved in what we're doing, in a way that they kind of feel what we're doing. And I would liken this to what happens in the theater, that an actor uses their skill, they're playing a sad scene, and so the audience, somebody in the back row, maybe nothing sad is going on in their life, but the actor, through their skill, energetically puts forth something that is read then as sadness, and the person in the back row gets sad about that, and they empathize.
And they get to feel it.
Their mirror neurons are busy firing at the same time, because people like to empathize just as much as they like to be, oh my God, I could never do that, I'm so impressed. So whilst we're trying to investigate themes like of beauty and mysticism and balance and harmony, if we're doing it well, the people in the audience should be experiencing something like what we're going through on stage, that they have an energetic experience that is like what we're doing, and that they feel what we're feeling or in the performing of it, and that it is genuinely meant as a way of manipulating prana or our energy or whatever you want to call it to reach out and affect people, to, in one sense, achieve a kind of unity with them. Not that they necessarily become exactly one with us, but if sadness or mysticism or beauty is what's going on, they should be experiencing something in that realm, rather than wondering, how long is it until intermission? Like, wow, I need a drink after watching these guys.
Yeah. And where do you find the inspiration to do this? To project this?
Gosh, I don't know. Where does inspiration come from?
From what you're feeling, from what you're feeling that specific kind of day? Or?
It takes about a year to write a show, and that includes commissioning music, getting it composed. Sometimes I do the composition, but a real Renaissance man, of course, do it all under an assumed name. But it evolves slowly. I mean, it's kind of, it's becoming a little bit of I'm feeling a bit stereotyped in that a lot of my stuff thematically deals with death. But I'm sure everybody else's does too. Come on, it's all about death, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
But it's humorous. I mean, it's like you say it's about death and people think, oh, yeah, right.
And why about death? Why?
Oh, God, is that something to do with me? I suppose it's because I think it's inherent in the yoga material as well, that ultimately there's in theater and dance and yoga, I think there is a ritual aspect that tries to address what the mystery of death is about. So I'm thinking just in Europe, for instance, at the transition between the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods, where people went from being hunter-gatherers to having a more settled and agrarian existence, they, I'm speaking very generally here, they initially, when they settled, at the outskirts of what their territory was, seems to be where they would build what they would call long houses, and many families would live in one of these. And when there were deaths, they sort of buried the long house, and that was kind of it. They made like a form out of that. It's called a long barrow. And as I understand it, then this form gradually changed over time from being that into homes that were circular. But again, the same thing. When people died, they buried these houses and perhaps buried the people in it. And gradually, this round form changed to something that seems, again, I'm maybe speculating a bit much, but it then changed to a ditch that was sometimes marked with large timbers, and so you had what's known as a henge and these forms around it. And in the ditch, you had sort of a high round area, so that it would appear that what was going on in the middle of this became an area of some kind. And perhaps you would have people who were outside the demarcation, but who could sit and watch what was going on. And certainly we find within these domes, they began to sort of make little spaces inside that perhaps had an entry to it. And when they excavate these, they find that though it was a small space, someone had put all the thigh bones in this corner, and all the skulls go over here.
Really?
And really weird stuff. Like they would find bodies sort of in these curled up positions, which everybody assumed was, oh yeah, that's a body doing that. And only recently they've discovered that in fact they made these bodies sometimes out of many different individuals. And so some kind of bizarre ritual activity is happening inside these little things, and people apparently were able to observe, but the timbers were sort of around, but a permeable space, which they weren't allowed into, I guess, but they could see into what was going on there. And so it would appear then that this evolved then into what we know as stone circles, which again, it sort of got rid of the whole thing in there, but you had an internal space which was observable from a kind of theater, a ritual space somehow associated with death. And
wow, that's amazing.
But I think seems to have been the interest of yogis as well, that it's some kind of, what happens if I stop breathing? What happens to me when I die? How can I not die? How can I make my body live forever? These are the sort of questions that seem to have been in some way informing yoga inquiry early on. And I feel the same appears. We look at the forms in, say, cave paintings in France. The forms of humans, sometimes there's a human with an animal sort of mask head, and they seem to be kind of animated. Right? Why don't they do it this way? Again, why do you go into a dark cave and paint things with people throwing spears at animals? And on some level, we're talking death mystery. And I think this is just it. It's one of the things that humankind is interested in.
Of course.
We want to know, to be reassured or to be scared, because that's kind of like being on a roller coaster and death is coming. Are you scared by that yet? And some people, death doesn't scare me. It's dying I'm afraid of. And they say stuff like that. But everybody, is interested in how to deal with it and the tragedy of the people we love most dying and how we find solace. And also, the crazy things we do to torture ourselves with, it's just a fascinating subject. The current piece is less about that. It's more about the notion of aging, which is, it's about a performer who's on his final tour, and he's been touring for years. It's not autobiographical, but it really isn't. But one uses what one can, and it's like how they deal with pain and how they deal with why am I doing this? They're in pain and suffering artistic doubt. Why am I doing this after all these years? It doesn't seem to make any difference. And this is I think we find. These days, I assume many of my peers are also wondering why they keep teaching yoga. Why am I still doing this? Oh my God, class numbers are going down. Do I still believe in yoga? Now that I've said all these things when I was 40 and I'm turning 65, does it still hold true? Am I, what has happened? And I imagine just with the number of people who are into yoga, if you want to make money, get into old age yoga now. There's going to be a lot of people doing it. That's where the mega sterlings are. That's it. Libre sterlina. So that's. I think we'll find a lot of people old age, aging into death, decrepitude. Where does yoga stand on this? I think these are going to increasingly be subjects that yoga will have to address. The people who are doing great asana now, like what's it going to be like when you're 70? Will you still be doing great asana, or will that even matter? The joke has been, asana, young person's yoga. When you get older, then you'll find real yoga. And people being a bit slow to actually define what real yoga is, opposed to monkeys jumping around asana stuff. It's always easy to insult that which you cannot do. Possibly a great synthesis of fantastic asana or vinyasa coupled with rigorous intellect and deep imaginative understanding of significance in form will actually happen to you when you get old.
So let's talk about the past of yoga. What do you think?
How far back shall we go?
How far back do you want to go?
I think yoga is quite new in its incarnation. Perhaps 100 years is about as relevant as it gets. Maybe go 150 in terms of what we're doing now. The bulk of it, obviously, there is material that, with a lot of speculation and stretching our imaginations, you can claim it maybe goes back 5,000 years. How much that would be a yoga like we know anything about, and it's curious to see contemporary people endeavor to speculate on what the contemplative pursuits of the ancients were, especially when one knows that you can hardly even suss what's going on in the mind of the person who's like right next to you. It's what is she thinking? So it's a bit presumptuous that we do think we know what the meditative practices might have been of these ancients. And there's so little record, really, of what the physical practices are. But speculation, of course, is interesting and may not be utterly misinformed. But it's new. Yeah. Let's face it, it's new, and claims that people make towards this is a sacred form of blah blah blah. They're probably working hard to convince themselves and convince the people whose money they're endeavoring to take. More power to them if they give them many good things at the same time. There are worse ways in which they could be ripping off the public, I suppose. I'm just saying that to be overtly cynical, and not because I truly believe that much.
I know.
Whoops.
Well, do you think it's evolving somewhere?
Oh God, I hope so. It's gone through in the last 20 years. Let's talk about 20 years, say. It certainly seemed that much was possible 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It was a rich and very innovative and exploratory time, and it was attractive to young, hip people. People who had tattoos. My God, a tattoo was something kind of new. But there was something edgy about it, and this was quite a move from my initial encountering of it would have been in the late 1960s, and when it was a hippie thing, and it kind of, that was a little bit sort of wafty. So the incarnation that came about as robust forms of yoga such as hardcore Iyengar and Ashtanga began to become better known, and Shivananda as well. I mean, there were some pretty hardcore Shivananda practitioners. Suddenly there was a much more robust kind of physical yoga which had this promise of the esoteric around it, and the mystical, and the maybe magical, and it was interesting stuff. There was a deep fervor of experimentation into how far can this be pushed. For whatever reasons, probably because the popularity of yoga was such that the people who are pushing at the high end, they had to pull back a little bit to make it more acceptable to a broader public. Maybe not consciously doing so, but for yoga to be more inclusive and to spread the good word, it did have to be toned down somewhat and become less experimental in a sense, and less rigorous, certainly physically. And with that lowering of the standards, I would say that to make it acceptable to everybody's mom and dad, and maybe their grandparents as well, there's been, hey, don't push too hard. Listen to your body. If your body says it's time to go to pose of the child, or don't go, if you need to go and check your emails, go and check your email. And
phone.
to the point, now people bring their phones into class and they're filming, they're doing stuff, and it just so it's all come to a level where the rigor of it has been undone. And there still is a respect, I suppose, for the form. Everybody recognizes certain things are quite difficult, and definitely could be said at this point in time there are more people doing really what would have been incredibly difficult asana or vinyasa work 25, 30 years ago. At the standard of what's going on in most yoga studios, it's pretty up there. However, it's not like that's been accompanied by a similar amount of intellectual rigor. So
just the physical part.
The people who are doing the form indeed make good forms, and there is a certain beauty and challenge to the spirit in learning this stuff and taking that and inspiring people. And even if they're not doing as difficult things, but the significance of the form is not really being deeply addressed. Why these forms are meant to evoke the higher aims of yoga. And I don't want to put this into a hierarchical sense. On some level, I was saying earlier that what is yoga? Well, it is a system of some kind, a canon of techniques by which one attempts to take the entirety of one's being to examine the nature of reality. That, here I am living, having an experience, and I'm trying to take the things that I cognitively recognize and integrate those into something that is a pure experience of reality, the totality, the whole, the absolute, the universe in its infinite grandeur. And this is what yoga is supposed to be good at. Why does making these forms, what do I have to do with these forms in order to begin to address what it is to achieve freedom, to achieve ecstasy, or have a mystic understanding that embraces an infinite totality. At the moment, it's like, can I touch the back of my head? That could be a useful thing in understanding the nature of reality. There might be something in the form, in the idea that something that's moving in a way that goes through the toes and also to the back of the head and achieves some form of circularity. Perhaps there is something in that expresses or helps one understand the nature of reality. But that's not really what's being stressed. It's like
sometimes it just stays in the physical part or in the achievement part, but without expressing something else.
I think it is an interesting tension between a movement into that reality, into the universe, as well as what the internal journey is. That there is some kind of balance going on between what one regards within oneself, how one takes oneself and transmutes that into an energy that is moving into the universe. There's an inward and an outward journey of some sort. Journey, what a pretentious word. Oh, my path, my journey. But I would say there's an intellectual rigor that is not perhaps being considered sufficiently. Particularly, I would say, in the realm of cause and effect, that things only happen for reasons. I'm not going to, in the next 3 seconds, turn into a frog, because nothing that we can do here in the next 3 seconds. No, kiss me. I'll turn into the prince. It's just not going to happen. That doesn't. Yeah. There's no cause that could make that effect occur. But people seem to not understand that in a yogic sense, that what you're doing when you make a movement, we'll call it expressive if you want, but it's that makes something else happen. That whether it's a slight breeze that goes in that direction, there is something that is being moved in the world by what you do, and it has effects. We do things and effects occur. We may not be able to exactly manipulate things to have the effect as we want, but the more skilled we become with the yoga techniques, the better we are at engaging with reality and recognizing what reality is. That's like a subject for the next 3-year long essay.
But how does Tripsichore helps us to be aware of that reality?
Well, technically, certainly in the performance of our sequences and vinyasas, there's nothing sacred about them. The technique is such that you endeavor with the whole of your being to achieve a fluidness of movement, an evenness of movement. You seek to synchronize the evenness of the breath with an evenness of movement. Don't ask me what this pretentious hand stuff is that I'm doing here. And in synchronizing breath and movement, there is, we assume something synchronizes in the brain as well, in the mind as well, that there's an evenness of mental process to move smoothly and breathe smoothly. Mentally, something smooth must be going on. Now, it might be that by moving smoothly and breathing smoothly, you get your mind to become more smooth, or it might go the other way around. You make your mind get even so that you are controlling it that way around. Either of those are possible. Now, whether or not you think evenness of mind and being skilled in action are important yoga things that help you become cognizant of reality, it's perhaps debatable. I mean, that might be just something that I say, and then you influence the student to believe, now you are breathing slowly and moving slowly, and that gives you more time to examine what the nature of is happening on a single breath. Whereas if you do it fast, and you probably don't notice quite so much. So I suppose the techniques seek, I'm oversimplifying. Again, be sure to come to my workshops where it's all explained in depth. But, you know, it's to do it so that you have enough time to notice what's going on. And to apply yourself in directing your action into this space that is not you, but which you can influence and which influences you in turn, where there is this reciprocal thing going on. And, you know, that's very much what happens in the Tripsichore experience, man.
It does. And why so many inversions in Tripsichore?
Oh gosh, it was there on the coconut shells. They were all, well, I picked them up upside down. They weren't meant to be that way, but then it was years later when I discovered that, that wasn't a 9, that was a 6. Okay, yes. Why so many? Something interesting happens in inversions that I find particularly expressive. The reason much of why we do what we do was because we were using them choreographically. And they got incorporated into the technique because we needed to practice this stuff to become accomplished at what we were trying to express. So, you know, you want to express, for instance, somebody who is in some kind of turmoil. Their world has been turned upside down. That having somebody in an inversion is, you know, incredibly evocative of that. You know, being upside down has something to say about the emotional landscape that a character is portraying. So that happened, and then I just, I suppose a lot of it has to do is I'm adept at that. So, oh gee, let's work on the stuff I'm good at. I mean, but you know, it's that there's lots of stuff in it that I'm not good at.
No, you're very good at it, at everything.
Oh yes, so true, so true. Yeah, and you heard it here, Consuelo said.
Workshops, yes. I mean, I've been to several, and I know. It's amazing.
Well, one doesn't make too much effort to show the things that one's not really good at during the workshop. It must be said. Oh, let's do the stuff I'm not good at. Maybe tomorrow.
We're in the middle of a workshop right now. But it's amazing. And what have you discovered while you practice Tripsichore about yourself? Have you discovered something?
There is no self. I discovered my
let's
great
talk
discovery.
about it.
I don't think there's, I mean, I have to say that Tripsichore and really trying to come up with a coherent idea as to what vinyasa consists of and what reality consists of, it seems to have revealed at this stage, and I might change my mind, that the nature of time or existence is things happen. Everything is change. There's the constant, the singularity is that nothing is staying the same, that it is forever undergoing change. And I have huge respect for and feel it is worthy of pursuit, the notion that one can try to attain a stillness of body, not changing, a stillness of mind, not changing the mind, holding it in a fixed position, could be a very interesting and useful concentration skill, and holding the breath may likewise be a technique for increasing this ability to hold concentration and achieve some kind of stillness. But it does seem to me to be completely crazy that, you're not actually still.
Of course
There's
not.
blood is still going through your veins. You're on a
Yeah.
planet that's spinning around. You're in a universe that appears to be expanding. It's just, it's an interesting and fascinating thing that may have much to teach about the nature of concentration. But if everything is change, it seems unlikely that there is a foundational self that is not changing. I may change my mind on that. Undoubtedly I will, because that would only be right, that I would change. But it seems we fabricate an interesting fiction for ourselves, it seems, that we are coherent. And we manage to gloss over the parts that, like 10 seconds ago I was like really nervous because I wasn't confident about what I was talking about. And now I've gotten into this sort of thing. Me, nervous? No, I'm always calm because my foundational self is absolutely clear on who it is. And, of course, this all depends then on what one's definition of a foundational self is. But it seems to me that it's a marvelously fluctuating, it's a process. It's like the river streaming along, like time is streaming along. It's undergoing change, but it's a convenient fiction that helps us get through dealing with other people and life and everything, that there is a consistency here.
So you think that we don't have a foundational self, or that it's changing? What do you think?
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it. Let me write that down. I think it's all changing, and I think that gives us great freedom, because it could be just that it's change that happens to us that we pretend not to notice, or we genuinely don't notice because I'm me, I'm always me, I've never been anything but me. Or it could be that we actually are at liberty to go with whatever we fancy. Why shouldn't we change? Like, why should I be consistent? Well, where consistency is useful, well, I'll do that. But when it's not being useful, why shouldn't I get on and do something else? And I mean, one of the pieces of marketing strategy that we find in yoga now is that, take this course and you will be transformed. Yeah. Which seems to suggest that you go into another place. Obviously there's a change. And then once you're transformed, you'll be okay. You'll no longer be like 48 years old and divorced and wondering what to do with your life. You'll be transformed. But, the question really is, once you've been transformed, does it just stop there, or actually is it not that you're constantly being transformed, but you can take charge of your transformation? On the other hand, on some deep and profound level, maybe you just are what you are. Oh my God.
Oh my God, yeah.
Which is better, and which is the fiction, and could they both be true at the same time? There are ways in which you could conceive that. I reckon one should be honest with oneself, but there's no need to be brutal with oneself. That's what you have teachers for. It's an incredibly entertaining universe, provided you're ready to open up to it. But even the worst and most tragic circumstances of one's life, the loss of a loved one, and you know, how do you make sense of that which is transformative but not nice transformative? I think some of our skills are to turn that into something that is realistic. This is something, it happens. Why see it, though, as something that is purely ugly and purely punitive? It's not just punishing. There are many ways to regard all things. A yogi's skill, perhaps, is that the way in which they regard the universe, reality, is one which can see beauty in tragedy. The skill is to take that which is awful and not be brutalized by it. It is reciprocal. Something from reality has affected your inner changing self. But you don't have to just let it stay with the state that it was when it first hit you. What you then do with it is difficult, but you know, it will cause the effects, maybe not exactly the ones you want, but at least you won't be entirely victimized by, oh, the universe is out to get me.
Yeah. Well, Edward, is there something else you want to tell us about Tripsichore?
Well, Tripsichore has been the great secret, and I'm trying a little bit to keep it secret. I would prefer it not to be extremely well known, because I feel, in a sense, the broader the appeal of something, the more it's diluted. It tends to have to be brought to a lower common denominator, and I would rather have it be a little bit of a secret, people not even know how to really pronounce the name Tripsichore. And for the people who go, I want to seek something special, something interesting, and they actually have to make the effort to come to get the knowledge, that it's not there just, oh, I'll YouTube it. Let's see what Tripsichore is on YouTube. And, you know, so it is very much a global thing. You know, there are people who do Tripsichore all over the world, but it is a little bit hush-hush, and I want to keep it that way. I'm not seeking to become exceedingly popular. Yeah, man of mystery.
Well, you are popular.
Oh,
you
so
are
true.
well.
I have failed. I'm so popular. But yeah, I mean, so, you know, the people who, you know, people watching this, you must swear never to tell another living soul that you've ever seen this presentation. Yeah, I want it to be special.
Yes.
I want it to be something where the standards are maintained at a very high level, if possible. Physically difficult, challenging, but with an aim to understanding that it's trying to achieve a great simplicity, and that the intellectual side of it has real rigor to it, and that it's informed by both Eastern and Western philosophy, that it is a yoga of our time and for the future.
Well, definitely it's a work of art. It's amazing. It's lovely. And where can people find out a little bit more, or how can
Well,
they
I'm
find
glad you asked that question. The secret website that you'll must never reveal to another soul. Best place, of course, is www.tripsichore.com. That's the website. Anything you need to know, you can probably start there.
So they can find there where they can be with you at workshops?
Workshops, The workshop information is all there, and the intensive courses that we do in London, that information is there, and performances where we're performing, that's all there.
You should go check it out. If you have the opportunity, please go to his workshops. Are amazing. If you want to advance in your practice, it's something very special. Thank you, Edward, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for getting to the end.
Thanks for watching. Please stay in touch, and we'll see you later.
Can we do royal waves to say goodbye?
Yes, of course.
So just that.
Like this?
That's it.
Do I got it?
Exhale, inhale, exhale.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Gracias. Estoy al pendiente de más contenido. Gracias.